Tom Hardy's character in Squid Game 2 was so dark that Hardy tore up the script after reading it. What did those pages contain? What Netflix offered Tom Hardy for Squid Game? Season 2 was so disturbing, so psychologically dark, that one of Hollywood's most fearless actors couldn't bring himself to play the role. This isn't just a story about a rejected character. It's about the moral boundaries that even the most dedicated method actors won't cross. Before we dive into this shocking revelation, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to learn about Tom Hardy's encounter with Squid Game will change everything you thought you knew about the limits of acting and the dark side of entertainment. The meeting took place on October 12th, 2023, in a nondescript office building in Seoul, South Korea. Tom Hardy had flown in specifically for this top-secret discussion with Netflix executives and Squid Game creator Dong-hyuk. The project was so confidential that Hardy had to sign multiple non-disclosure agreements before even entering the building. "We have something very special in mind for Season 2, Hwang had told Hardy through a translator. "A character that will challenge everything audiences think they know about human nature." Hardy, known for his intense preparation and willingness to take on psychologically demanding roles, was intrigued. He had played serial killers, terrorists, and sociopaths without hesitation. The darker the character, the more interested he became. But what was waiting for him in that sealed envelope would test the very limits of his artistic integrity. The character was designated only as Player 001 in the preliminary documents, a mysterious figure who would appear in the second season as both a participant and something far more sinister. The role came with a $50 million offer, making it one of the highest-paid television performances in history. Tom was excited, recalled his agent, Michael Stevens, who had accompanied him to Seoul. He saw this as an opportunity to work with one of the most innovative creative teams in the world. The success of Squid Game was undeniable, and Tom wanted to be part of that phenomenon. But when Hardy opened the detailed character breakdown and began reading the specific scenes he would be required to perform, something changed. Those who were present described his reaction as immediate and visceral. His face went pale, his hands began to shake, and after reading just 3 pages, he stood up abruptly. "I can't do this," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. Dong-hyuk, who had specifically written the role with Hardy in mind, looked confused. The Netflix executives, who had been preparing for months to announce Hardy's involvement, exchanged worried glances. "Perhaps we could discuss modifications to the character," suggested Sarah Kim, Netflix's head of international content. "We're always willing to collaborate," but Hardy was already gathering his things. Without another word, he took the script pages and tore them in half, then tore them again. The sound of ripping paper was the only noise in the room as Hardy systematically destroyed every page of the character breakdown. "Some lines shouldn't be crossed," he said finally, looking directly at Hwang. "Not even for art." What exactly was in those pages that could make Tom Hardy, a man who had never backed down from a challenging role, walk away from $50 million? The character of Player 001 wasn't just another Squid Game contestant. According to the leaked script details that emerged months later, this figure was designed to be the most psychologically complex and morally reprehensible character in the series' history. The role would require Hardy to portray someone who wasn't just participating in the games, but actively designing new, more horrific challenges for the other players. Hwang wanted to explore the psychology of someone who creates suffering for entertainment, explained Dr. Kim Min-jun, a Seoul National University professor who had consulted on the show's psychological aspects. Player 001 was meant to be a character who enjoyed watching others suffer, who found genuine pleasure in designing elaborate psychological torture. But the character's darkness went far beyond simple sadism. The script revealed that Player 001 was actually a wealthy Western businessman who had been funding the games for years, not just as a spectator, but as an active participant in their design and execution. He would enter the games not out of desperation like the other players, but for the pure thrill of controlling life and death. The most disturbing aspect of the character wasn't just his enjoyment of violence, but his method of psychological manipulation. Player 001 was written to systematically identify the other players' deepest fears and vulnerabilities, then exploit them not just to win the games, but to break them psychologically before they died. The character was designed to represent the ultimate corruption of power, said a former Netflix executive who spoke on condition of anonymity. He wasn't just killing people, He was destroying their souls first. The script included detailed scenes where player 001 would form fake friendships with other contestants, learn about their families and dreams, and then use that information to torture them psychologically during the games. In one particularly disturbing sequence, he would convince a mother that her children were watching her compete, then reveal it was a lie just before she was eliminated. Hardy's reaction to reading these scenes was immediate and intense. Those present described him as becoming visibly ill as he read through the character's actions. The man who had portrayed Charles Bronson, one of Britain's most violent criminals, was disturbed by the level of psychological cruelty the role demanded. Tom has always been able to separate himself from his characters, explained Dr. Sarah Matthews, a psychologist who had worked with Hardy on previous roles. But this character seemed to cross a line that he wasn't willing to cross, even in the context of performance. The script breakdown revealed that Player 001's ultimate goal wasn't just to win the games, but to corrupt the other players, to make them complicit in their own destruction. The character would manipulate contestants into betraying each other, turning friends into enemies, and parents into competitors against their own children. The psychological research behind this character was extensive, said Dr. Kim. They had consulted with experts in torture, manipulation, and psychological warfare. This wasn't just fiction. It was based on real methods used by real monsters. But what made Hardy's rejection even more significant was the method-acting preparation that would have been required. The role demanded that Hardy spend months researching real cases of psychological torture, studying the techniques used by interrogators and cult leaders, and essentially learning how to break another person's will. They wanted Tom to understand the character from the inside out, revealed his agent Stevens. That meant studying real psychological predators, learning their methods, and developing an intuitive understanding of how to manipulate and destroy other people psychologically. The preparation would have included sessions with forensic psychologists, interviews with former victims of psychological torture, and extensive research into the techniques used by serial killers and cult leaders. Hardy would have been required to develop what psychologists call predatory empathy, the ability to understand another person's vulnerabilities, specifically to exploit them. It's one thing to play a character who kills people, explained Dr. Matthews. It's another thing entirely to play a character who enjoys destroying their humanity first. The psychological toll of preparing for such a role could be enormous. The script also revealed that Player 001 would have multiple scenes involving children, not harming them physically, but psychologically manipulating child contestants in ways that were designed to be even more disturbing than physical violence. The character would use techniques specifically designed to break down a child's sense of safety and trust. This crossed every line, said a Netflix executive who was present during Hardy's rejection. We're talking about a character who would methodically destroy children's faith in adults, in safety, in the very concept of protection. Hardy's method-acting approach had always been intense, but this role would have required him to develop skills and psychological insights that could have permanent effects on his mental health. The character study would have involved learning how to read people's weaknesses, how to identify their breaking points, and how to exploit those vulnerabilities for maximum psychological impact. Tom realized that to play this character authentically, he would have to develop the actual skills of a psychological predator, Stevens explained. And once you develop those skills, you can't just turn them off when the cameras stop rolling. The financial offer was unprecedented. Netflix was prepared to pay Hardy $50 million for the role, plus back-end participation that could have brought his total compensation to over $100 million. It would have been the highest-paid television performance in history, surpassing even the most expensive film roles. But the money wasn't the issue. Hardy had turned down lucrative roles before, when they didn't align with his artistic vision. This was different. This was about fundamental questions of what entertainment should be, what audiences should be asked to watch, and what actors should be asked to become. Tom saw this as potentially harmful, not just to himself, but to audiences, said Dr. Matthews. He was concerned about the psychological impact of portraying such extreme manipulation and cruelty, even in a fictional context. The script included detailed instructions for how Player 001 would interact with the other contestants, complete with psychological profiles of each character and specific techniques for exploiting their vulnerabilities. It read less like a television script and more like a manual for psychological warfare. The level of detail was disturbing, said the anonymous Netflix executive. They had worked out exactly how to break each character psychologically, with specific dialogue and actions designed to cause maximum emotional damage. Hardy's concerns weren't just about the character itself, but about the message the show would send to audiences. Squid Game had already been criticized for its extreme violence, but this character would have taken the psychological cruelty to an entirely new level. Tom was worried about the cultural impact, Stevens revealed. He was concerned that audiences might be inspired by or learn from the psychological manipulations techniques the character would demonstrate. The role would have required Hardy to film scenes that were so psychologically intense that Netflix had planned to provide on-set counselors not just for Hardy, but for all the actors who would be performing opposite him. The psychological impact of the character was expected to be so intense that it could affect the entire cast. They were prepared to provide psychological support for everyone involved, said Dr. Kim. That should have been a red flag about the nature of the content they were creating. After Hardy's rejection, Netflix and Dong-hyuk spent months trying to convince him to reconsider. They offered script changes, character modifications, and even more money, but Hardy's decision was final. Some things are more important than money or career opportunities, Hardy told his agent. I won't be responsible for putting that kind of darkness into the world. The aftermath of Hardy's rejection sent shockwaves through both Netflix and the entertainment industry. The Player 001 character had been central to Squid Game Season 2's plot, and losing Hardy meant fundamental changes to the show's direction. Tom's rejection forced us to reconsider the entire season, admitted a Netflix executive who spoke anonymously. We had built the storyline around his character, and without him, we had to completely reimagine the show's approach. The immediate financial impact was staggering. Netflix had already invested $80 million in pre-production for Season 2, with much of that budget allocated to accommodating Hardy's character arc. Sets had been built, costumes designed, and supporting cast members hired specifically to work alongside Hardy's Player 001. The ripple effect was enormous, revealed a former Netflix production manager. We had to scrap entire set pieces, rewrite multiple episodes, and restructure the entire season's narrative. It was like pulling the foundation out from under a building. The psychological consultants who had been working on the project were also deeply affected by Hardy's decision. Dr. Kim Min-jun, who had helped develop the character's psychological profile, later expressed relief that the role had been rejected. After working on that character for months, I began to question whether we were creating something that should exist, Dr. Kim admitted. Tom's rejection made me realize that we had gone too far in our exploration of human darkness. Dong-hyuk was reportedly devastated by Hardy's decision. The creator had specifically written the role with Hardy in mind, believing that only an actor of his caliber could bring the necessary depth and complexity to such a challenging character. Hwang felt that Tom was the only actor who could have made that character work, said Dr. Kim Min-jun. He saw it as an opportunity to explore the darkest aspects of human nature through one of the world's most talented performers. The rejection also created a crisis of confidence within Netflix's content development team. Several executives who had championed the Player 001 character began to question their own judgment about what constituted acceptable entertainment. Tom's reaction was like a wake-up call, said another Netflix executive. Here was one of the most fearless actors in the industry, someone who had never backed down from a challenge, and he was telling us we had gone too far. The script for Player 001 was subsequently leaked to several media outlets, confirming the extreme nature of the character that Hardy had rejected. Entertainment journalists who reviewed the material described it as unprecedented in its psychological cruelty and potentially harmful to audiences. After reading those leaked pages, it's clear that Tom made the right decision, wrote Variety's television critic. This character would have pushed the boundaries of what's acceptable in entertainment far beyond what most audiences could handle. The leaked script revealed even more disturbing details about the character's methods. Player 001 was designed to use specific psychological techniques borrowed from real-world torture scenarios, including sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, and systematic psychological breaking procedures. The character wasn't just cruel, explained Dr. Sarah Matthews, who reviewed the leaked material. It was educational in the worst possible way. It was essentially a masterclass in psychological manipulation and torture. The Rejection also sparked broader conversations within the entertainment industry about the responsibilities of actors and creators when it comes to extremely dark content. Several other high-profile actors publicly supported Hardy's decision, with some sharing their own experiences of rejecting roles that crossed moral boundaries. "There has to be a line," said Oscar-winning actress Cate Blanchett in a subsequent interview. "Art should challenge us, but it shouldn't teach us how to become monsters." Christian Bale, another actor known for his intense method acting approach, also spoke out in support of Hardy's decision. "I've pushed myself to some dark places for roles," Bale said, "but Tom was right to recognize when a character could cause permanent psychological damage." The incident also prompted the Screen Actors Guild to issue new guidelines about psychological safety on sets, particularly for roles involving extreme psychological content. The union began requiring mandatory psychological support for actors taking on roles that involve portraying psychological manipulation or torture. Netflix ultimately decided to completely rewrite Season 2 of Squid Game, removing the player 001 character entirely and taking the show in a different direction. The decision reportedly cost the streaming service millions of dollars in pre-production costs and delayed the season's release by over a year. Tom's rejection saved the show from itself, said entertainment industry analyst Sarah Chen. That character could have destroyed the entire franchise's reputation and turned audiences away from the series entirely. The new direction for Squid Game Season 2 focused more on the societal conditions that create desperation rather than the psychology of those who exploit it. The show's creators worked with social psychologists and economists to develop storylines that examine systemic inequality rather than individual sadism. "We realized that the real horror wasn't in individual monsters," Dong-hyuk said in a later interview. "It was in the systems that create the conditions where such games could exist." Hardy himself has rarely spoken about the incident, but in one brief interview, he explained his decision. "I've played dark characters before, but there's a difference between exploring darkness and celebrating it. This character would have been celebrating the worst aspects of human nature." The incident also led to new guidelines at Netflix regarding psychological content and the support provided to actors taking on extremely challenging roles. The streaming service now requires psychological evaluation for roles that involve extreme manipulation or cruelty. "We learned that there are some stories that shouldn't be told, at least not in the way we were planning to tell them," said Ted Sarandos, Netflix's co-CEO, in a rare public acknowledgement of the incident. Today, Tom Hardy continues to take on complex and challenging roles, but the Squid Game rejection remains a defining moment in his career, a reminder that even in the pursuit of artistic excellence, some boundaries should never be crossed. The pages Hardy tore up that day in Seoul contained what might have been the most psychologically disturbing character in television history. His decision to walk away from $50 million proved that some things are more valuable than money: integrity, morality, and the responsibility that comes with the power to influence audiences around the world. The incident has since become a case study in film schools and psychology programs, used to examine the ethical responsibilities of entertainment creators and the potential psychological impact of extreme content on both performers and audiences. If this story about Hardy's moral stand shocked you, subscribe for more incredible behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories.